From a tone 5123. Quote, Palestine, British Protectorate, May 1948. Jews got a part of the land, and from then on they continually invade the Palestinian domain and keep snatching land to this day, even though they signed a few international treaties that explicitly forbade them from doing so. However, with the help of the U.S., they keep spitting on those treaties and demolish homes, steal land, shoot civilians, and yes, seldom do you hear about Palestinians hitting Jewish civilians. Proportionally, Jews kill several hundred times the number of their civilian and military casualties, unquote. What a pathetic pack of lies. First of all, there has never been a Palestine in history. The term Palestine and Palestinian are false terms. There is no Palestine. There are no Palestinians. The Arabs themselves denied that there's a Palestine or a Palestinian people until 50 years ago. Only 50 years ago they started with this. The Arabs always said that there is no Palestine, there are no Palestinians. Dr. Philip Hitti, who was the representative of the Arabs living in the land of Israel before the Peel Commission, said that there is no Palestine in history. Absolutely not. The Arab League deny that there's a Palestine. The Arab nations in the UN and the Arab ambassadors in the UN and the representatives of the Arabs living in the land of Israel denied that a Palestine or a Palestinian people exist, because it was the Jews who were called Palestinians 50 years ago. So that term is a false term that doesn't exist. Secondly, you want to deny the Jewish people one tiny little country in the Middle East and commit genocide against the Jewish people. That is what you want. There are 67 Muslim Nazi countries in the world. 67 Muslim countries. And there's one tiny little Jewish country that the entire Arab world and the entire Muslim world has been trying to destroy since 1948. The Jews never would have fired a single shot or done anything against the Arabs except in self-defense, except because the Arabs attacked them openly. In 1948, the Arab Muslim Nazi ambassadors to the UN went before the UN and bragged in front of the whole world that they were going to finish Hitler's job and push the Jews into the sea and commit genocide. 3 years after the Holocaust ended in 1948, they said they're going to finish Hitler's job and commit another Holocaust against the Jews living in the land of Israel. And the Jews heroically, miraculously, against all odds, outnumbered 100-1, just as it says in the Bible, beat back 7 invading Arab armies from 7 Arab countries that were much bigger than tiny little Israel. There were only 600,000 Jews in Israel at that time. They were outnumbered 100-1 by the Arabs. And they heroically, miraculously, in a breathtaking victory right out of the Bible, defeated the Arab Muslim Nazi invaders who attacked Israel and promised to push the Jews into the sea and exterminate the Jewish people. You have a tiny little country, one tiny little Jewish state smaller than New Jersey, that's constantly begging for peace, which if we were in charge they wouldn't be. We wouldn't beg anybody for peace. You can go to hell if you don't like Israel. Screw you. But this one tiny little country, smaller than New Jersey, and you want and that's too much for you. But the Muslim Nazis have 67 countries with most of the world's oil. Even though they produce nothing, create nothing, they bloodsuck off the whole world with their oil. They're bloodsucking and destroying the whole world economy for decades now with oil. And you and commit terrorism, and you talk about Jews killing Arabs? Are you kidding me? Millions of Arabs and millions of Muslims have been murdered by their fellow Arabs and their fellow Muslims. In the Iran-Iraq war, 2 million Muslims were murdered by their fellow Muslims. In Sudan, 2 million blacks, some of them Christian and some of them Muslim, were murdered by Arab Muslims in the north. I could give you endless other instances of the 300,000 Arabs in Lebanon in the Lebanese Civil War in the 1970s, murdered by fellow Arabs. Millions have been slaughtered. Holocausts have been committed by Arabs against other Arabs, by Muslims against other Muslims. How come you don't speak about this? How come the media doesn't cover this? How come you attack only little Israel when little Israel survives? Because you're Nazi Jew haters. Israel owes you nothing. And if you want to attack Israel and try to destroy the Jews, you deserve whatever you get. The Jews are going to fight back, and they're going to defeat you, and they're going to win, and they're going to survive, because God is on their side. That's why little Israel wins in 6 days when they're outnumbered 100-1. 10 of ye shall chase 1,000 of them, and 100 of ye shall put 10,000 of them to flight. And you, Bnei Amalek, the children of Amalek that are trying to destroy the heroic Jewish nation, you will be defeated, and you will face destruction. Not the Jewish people who have returned to their homeland and have returned forever. And the next question comes from Utourd Regis, whatever that is. I didn't pronounce it right, but whatever. Who writes, and I quote, "I oppose Zionism and do not hate Jews altogether. However, it seems that the vast majority of Jews support Zionists because they are led to believe that they're the true Jewry. I seriously think after studying the Talmud Bavli that Jews are the ones who say they are Jews, but they are not, for they are the synagogue of Satan," unquote. Oh, you don't hate Jews. No, they're just the synagogue of Satan. Yeah. That's like saying Hitler is not an anti-Semite. Anyone who is against Zionism means they're against the right of the Jewish people to their own country. To deny the Jewish people the right to their own country is the ultimate anti-Semitism. To condemn the Jewish people to being a homeless, defenseless, helpless nation that faces Holocaust, inquisitions, pogroms, and slaughter as they did for 2,000 years, and deny them their right to national sovereignty is the worst form of anti-Semitism. No people on the face of the earth more deserves their own nation than the Jewish people, because it is the one nation that God gave to a specific group of people. God assigned the land of Israel in the Bible as part of an eternal covenant to the Jewish people. It's amazing that the same people who insist that we've got to be considerate of the rights of the Muslims to have 67 countries would deny the Jews the right to one tiny little country. Do you know that the Arab world, just the Arabs, and the Arabs are only 20% of the world's Muslims, but just the Arabs, only the Arabs, have more than 600 times the land that the Jews have? The 22 mostly big Arab countries, mostly huge Arab countries that surround tiny little Israel, which is smaller than New Jersey, you know that the Arab countries alone have more than 600 times the land that the Jews have in their little country. But that's too much for the anti-Semites of the world, for the Jew haters of the world. As the Egyptian ambassador to the UN said in 1948, in the debate, he said, even if Israel were 1 square mile in Tel Aviv, we would reject its existence and we would march to destroy the Jewish state. And the Egyptian army did in fact, together with other Arab armies, attack the Jewish state. You know that Israel was created on May 15, 1948, on the very first day of Israel's creation. A nation that was formed 3 years after the Holocaust, a nation of Holocaust survivors. 3 years after that, this tiny little nation is created. On the very first day Israel was created, 7 Arab armies attacked the Jewish state and invaded the Jewish state. 7 Arab armies on the very day, on May 15, 1948, the very day Israel was created, and promised and swore in the United Nations before the whole world, their ambassadors swore that they were going to destroy the Jews and push the Jews into the sea. That's the battle between the Jews and the Muslims. That's the battle of Zionism. The right of the Jewish people to return to their homeland. It is their land. It is their land. And they're fighting for their survival against those that want Nazi genocide. It's the battle of the Jews against purveyors of Nazi genocide. Now, next is from Free Gaza Arabs, who writes, and I quote, "The Jews financed the slave trade that led to the death of 100 million African Negroes. Therefore, the Jews must pay reparations," unquote. The Jews financed the slave trade and are responsible for the death of 100 million American Negroes. First of all, there were never 100 million. 100 million Negroes were brought here as slaves? 100 million? You only had a few 100,000 at the time. I mean, you only had a few 100,000 at the most that were brought here. And eventually they reproduced and became larger and larger numbers. But the claim that there was that 100 million were killed, black anti-Semites and affirmative action people have no conception of numbers. Numbers and figures, they have no conception when it comes to numbers and figures. It reminds me one time I was debating one, and he said, billions of black people have been murdered by you. Billions of black people were murdered by Jews. And the truth is, the Jews were never involved in the slave trade, you Nazi lying scum animals. The Jews were slaves themselves in the ghettos of Europe when the slave trade was taking place in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. The Jews weren't involved in any slave trade. The Jews are the only people that supported you in the civil rights movement and still support you, stupidly. And you blame them for the slave trade? You make up stories, Farrakhan and the Muslims and all the scum that hate the Jewish people. You make up lies and blame the Jews for slave trade? The Jews were never involved in the slave trade. Never. Incidentally, I wouldn't want you as my slaves. I'm a Jew, I'm a good businessman. I want slaves who work.